More and more details are emerging about the scandalous negotiations between Steve Witkoff and the Russians. As it turned out, oligarchs close to the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, Yuri Kovalchuk, Gennady Timchenko, and the brothers Arkady and Boris Rotenberg began confidential discussions with the United States of America about future joint business projects in Russia in the event that sanctions are lifted. According to a Wall Street Journal source, during secret meetings, representatives of the businessmen offered American companies access to gas fields, rare earth metals, and major energy assets in Russia. For example, American businessmen led by Steve Witkoff are ready to join Russian projects like Arctic, liquefied natural gas Rosneft, Lukoil, Nord Stream 2, and others. Such contacts between Putin's businessmen and Americans explain why Trump is in such a hurry to make deals. Contacts Putin's businessmen are ready through Steve Witkoff. As the Wall Street Journal writes, last month 3 influential businessmen, 2 Americans and 1 Russian, were huddled over a laptop in Miami. Supposedly, they were there to come up with a plan to end Russia's long and deadly war against Ukraine. But according to people familiar with the negotiations, the scope of their project was much broader. They were privately developing a plan to save the Russian economy, which is worth $2 trillion. At the same time, American companies would be the first to receive dividends ahead of their European competitors. This refers to a meeting between Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and Kirill Dmitriev at the end of October at Witkoff's residence in Miami. And now remember how I told you in previous episodes about how Trump wants to use the Russian assets frozen in Europe. So, as it turned out, it is actually Putin's envoy, Kirill Dmitriev, who is pushing the plan under which American companies could use about $300 billion of the Russian central bank's assets frozen in Europe for United States, Russian investment projects, and the reconstruction of Ukraine. Under United States leadership, American and Russian companies could join forces to develop the vast mineral resources in the Arctic. Dmitriev has been claiming for months that the achievements for the 2 longtime rivals, Russia and the United States, are actually limitless. Their competing space industries, which rivaled each other during the Cold War, could even carry out a joint mission to Mars with SpaceX. Obviously, the Russians would contribute on their part. Let me remind you, after the recent Baikonur accident, the Russians can't launch anything into space now. They physically can't send anyone to the International Space Station, and now, a quote from the Wall Street Journal. Western intelligence agencies say the Kremlin saw the Miami negotiations as the peak of a pre-inauguration strategy to bypass the United States national security system and influence Americans. The president's administration should view Russia not as a military threat, but as a country of generous opportunities. By offering multi-billion-dollar deals on rare earth metals and energy resources, Moscow could reshape the economic map of Europe while simultaneously driving a wedge between America and its traditional allies. Kirill Dmitriev found receptive partners in Steve Witkoff, a longtime golf partner of Trump, and Kushner, whose investment fund attracted billions in investments from Arab monarchies involved in a conflict with Israel, which he helped to resolve. Both businessmen shared President Trump's long-standing approach to geopolitics. While generations of diplomats viewed the post-Soviet problems of Eastern Europe as a Gordian knot that needed to be painstakingly untangled, President Trump saw a simple solution: borders matter much less than business. In the 1980s, he offered to personally negotiate a swift end to the Cold War, while at the same time, as he told Soviet diplomats, building a Trump Tower across from the Kremlin using the communist regime as a business partner. And in this situation, Europeans understand perfectly well what's happening. When Western leaders gathered this week to discuss that very Trump peace plan, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk gave a very brief but very meaningful quote. We know this isn't about peace, it's about business. As a result, the Wall Street Journal writes that while Witkoff was presenting the peace plan, Putin's friends Gennady Timchenko, Yuri Kovalchuk, and the Rotenberg brothers sent their representatives to secret meetings with American companies to discuss deals on rare earth metals and energy resources. Earlier this year, ExxonMobil met with Russia's largest state-owned energy company, Rosneft, to discuss returning to the large-scale Sakhalin gas project. If Moscow and Washington give the green light to this, the Americans also want to restart the Nord Stream pipelines. In addition, Gentry Beach is a college friend of Donald Trump Jr. and a sponsor of his father's election campaign. He is negotiating to acquire a stake in a Russian Arctic gas project in case the sanctions are lifted. This is about Arctic liquefied natural gas. One another sponsor of Donald Trump, Stephen Lynch, has already paid $600,000 this year to a lobbyist who is helping him obtain a license from the United States Treasury Department to purchase the Nord Stream 2 pipeline from a Russian state company. And here's a simple fact for you to understand. Stephen Witkoff, who is deciding what the peace plan for Ukraine should be, has never been to Ukraine. But he is flying to Russia for the 6th time this year. The question remains, whose interests is Steve Witkoff really defending? Now it's clear why Witkoff wants to close the deal quickly. The Wall Street Journal says Dmitriev is now the main figure in business talks with the Americans. Leaders of American and Russian businesses are highly anticipating that Witkoff and Dmitriev will accomplish the task of positioning their company to profit from the end of the war in Ukraine. Here are a few examples. Next, a quote. During secret negotiations, ExxonMobil's senior vice president Neil Chapman met in Qatar with the head of Rosneft, Igor Sechin, former personal secretary to Putin, to discuss Exxon's return to the large-scale Sakhalin project, investments in which were suspended after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In 2022, ExxonMobil investor Todd Boyle and others are considering the possibility of purchasing Lukoil's assets. Recently, Kremlin-linked businessmen Timchenko, Kovalchuk and Rotenberg have been offering their American colleagues concessions for gas extraction in the Sea of Okhotsk, as well as possibly in 4 other locations. Russia has also mentioned opportunities for rare earth metal extraction near the major nickel mines of Norilsk and in 6 other undeveloped Siberian deposits. In addition, one of Trump's friends, Gentry Beach, is planning to buy 10% of the Arctic liquefied natural gas project, even though the company is under sanctions from the entire West. But as strange as it may sound, thanks to the mad dictator Vladimir Putin, all these deals could fall through. The Wall Street Journal describes the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska and writes that Witkoff wanted to strike while the iron was hot and hold the summit without delay. Dmitriev was optimistic since Witkoff considered Russia's sensitivity. We believe that Steve Witkoff and Trump's team are doing a great job in trying to understand Russia's position on ending the conflict, Dmitriev said. But the August 15 summit fell apart almost immediately after it began. Putin immediately started with a lecture about the 1,000-year history of unity between the Russian and Ukrainian peoples. The parties cancelled both lunch and the afternoon meeting, where they planned to discuss issues like prisoner exchange. Witkoff left without knowing how things turned out in the end. Nevertheless, it should be stated that yes, Stephen Witkoff is clearly trying to make business deals. And as was mentioned in one of today's reports, John Bolton put it very clearly. He says Trump doesn't care at all what kind of deal it will be. He doesn't care at all what concessions are being made. He doesn't care at all who is making what concessions. What, if not something, will allow us to decorate 6 positions? It's convenient, wrote Obitel Nimir. This is such